Well, the fandom menace seemed to be right. What a shocker. Who would have thought it? Well, everyone in the fandom menace, because we've been saying it for years now. Guys, Final Death Star here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and do subscribe, because I appreciate it. It really helps out and makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. All right, so let's get into this. This is going to be kind of a call to to arms, so to speak, metaphorically. With the recent news that's come out on Emperor Palpatine and the fact that he is a clone, and now we have a story that goes even further into the ridiculousness that is the Rise of Skywalker, and the lack of writing and the lack of creativity and the lack of thoughtfulness. And then Rian Johnson's comments. This all boils down to one thing: a lack of vision, a lack of leadership, and the fact that Kathleen Kennedy needs to step down or to be removed as president of Lucasfilm. It's too much. It's gone too far. She really doesn't have a hold or a grasp on this franchise, and it's clear to see. We've been saying this for years now, and with news sources coming out basically stating we were right. It's unavoidable at this point. So we're going to take a look at this. First of all, this is Rian Johnson here says that world building for movies is not that interesting to him, and that he can't imagine getting excited about that. So let's just take a listen here, first of all, to this.
Let's say you're creating your own universe. You said you don't think about actors. You're starting kind of something from scratch. How is that approach versus something where you have a pre-existing universe? Like, if you're writing characters for Star Wars, you have this universe. You have characters that everybody knows, and then now you are doing something from scratch. Like, do you find your approach is different for that?
No, not at all. Because I don't. I don't know. I don't really think in terms of universes, or in terms of creating worlds or whatever. That's not that interesting to me. The only thing that's interested in me is story, and the story specific to, like, whether you're writing a Star Wars film or that's part of a 3-movie trilogy or quote unquote original thing like Knives Out. You're still telling a story that's new to the thing that you're doing, that it has to work within the context of that movie. So to me, the notion of what's the entire galaxy or world that you're creating or something, I can't imagine getting excited about creating that. To me, what I'm excited about is creating a 2-hour-long experience for an audience to have in the theater.
Okay, that's all you need to hear about that. He is not at all interested about creating or thinking about the world and the universe that his story is taking place at. It's not just part of a trilogy, as he says. It's part of 40 years. And he's using characters that we know, have grown to love, and he doesn't even care about the world that he's building. Can you imagine Lucas? What would he say to that? What would he be thinking with a statement like that? You're hiring a director that doesn't care about the world or the universe that his story is being set in. He doesn't care enough to take the time to make sure things line up with what's become before, with the lore. Do the characters interact in a way that denotes how you'd expect them to act, what we've seen before? Does the story line up with what you expect out of a Star Wars story? No, he's just worried about his story secluded in that 2.5-hour movie or whatever it was, and to damn to hell with the rest of it. He could care less. It's not interesting to him, and from a writer's perspective, fine. If that's the kind of story and the kind of guy he wants to be, great. But don't hire him for Star Wars. Something that it's all about the world building. Lucas put time and care into the world building. So did a lot of the writers from the EU to create, to make it feel like it's lived in. You immerse yourself in this world, and he doesn't care about it at all. It's all about the story to him. So I think that's a huge problem. And to hire him as the director with that vision, with that kind of thought process, is a huge, huge mistake. And it's something that Kathleen Kennedy, I mean, she's the head of Lucasfilm, so the buck stops with her. And it really shows the lack of care that the leaders of this franchise have when they're willing to hire a guy who not only has he stated that he loves controversy, a successful film to him is not one that does not have controversy. The audience must walk out half loving it, half hating it. That is how he determines what a successful film is. So we already knew that. He said that years ago. And now he has this thought of who cares about world building? And they've backed him up so much. It's insane. So, this is what I consider a problem of Kathleen Kennedy's. Here is something else. Jason Ward. Also, I'm shocked at this. Imagine defending Rian Johnson. This was a tweet, that Sheev had said there. And then Jason Ward making Star Wars, says he's a Star Wars fan. Has a whole website devoted to it. He says, I don't care about old Star Wars canon and history. That already should have red flags going up everywhere. I care about results. The Last Jedi is a badass Star Wars film. The best of the current generation. The results. He cares about results. You know what the results were of that movie? It disrupted the flow of a trilogy. It tore a franchise apart. The fan base was literally broken and ripped into two, or I'd say, more than two. Because I don't think it's 50-50. I think it's probably like 70-30, maybe even 80-20, that don't like Last Jedi compared to those who do, or that don't like Disney's canon compared to those who do. I'd say it's way more than 50-50. But I don't care about Star Wars canon and history. How can you say that you're a Star Wars fan and you don't care about the canon and the history? You have to care about what came before. You can't respect what we have now without respecting what's come before. And you're saying you don't care about any of that. You care about results. Hey, look, he's entitled to his opinion. It's fine, but I don't understand how anyone can view this statement and his point of view as hold him in the esteem of a Star Wars fan, one of the leaders of the community. In my opinion, that's my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. I just don't know how you can say that. I don't care about old Star Wars canon and history. That is mind-blowing. But this is the mindset of people who just who can't, I guess, take losing, because I think it's pretty clear now that the Disney canon is a mess. We've been saying it, the fandom has, for a while. Now it's more news sources are starting to catch on and realize, hey, they might have had it right all along. But there's these people who just who are going to defend it. I mean, to the last dying breath of the franchise, and we have a case here. I don't care about old Star Wars canon and history. That's just mind blowing. When the creator of it literally said, "I don't care about world building," and you're gonna double down. I guess that's all you have left, though. What else can you do? Just double down, I guess, triple down, and that's what we see here. So, and that brings me into this story. Well, both of these stories, but we'll start with this one. Palpatine is a clone. Oh my gosh. The Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker is a clone. And this has been revealed in the novelization of the Rise of Skywalker. Obviously, because there was so little detail in the movie, there was so much left unexplained, didn't make sense, that now they have to go overboard, trying to make up for things and trying to fill in the little details, or the big details, as the case may be when it comes to Palpatine. A huge detail, like how did he survive? How did he come back? Well, he didn't really survive. He He cloned himself, but the clone apparently they couldn't get the good version of the Palpatine. They had this old decrepit version because that's apparently all they could clone. They weren't on Camino. It would have made a little more sense, I guess, had they used Camino. Had the Emperor cloned himself during the Clone Wars, because I think that's something he would have done. He was afraid of death and losing power. So why not clone yourself on Camino? But hey, I don't know. It's the whole thing's silly anyway. So I'm just going to read the little bit of the novelization that this explains. How he survived, and it's as ridiculous as it sounds. Okay, falling down a massive shaft. This is, of course, referring to the Death Star 2, where he's the final Death Star, where Vader's throwing him in the down the shaft of the Death Star, down a massive shaft. I think the audience got shafted, honestly, with this whole thing, this whole debacle. The betrayal sharp and stinging. A figure high above, black-clad and helmeted and shrinking fast. His very own apprentice had turned against him, the way he himself had turned against Plagueis. Confirmation. Whose secret to immortality he had stolen. So we have confirmation here that Plagueis was the master of Palpatine. Something we weren't sure of. The Trevorrow's script had a different creature that was going to become the master. It was like a spider-like creature, and it was going to be on Korriban, kind of the antithesis to Yoda. That's the version that Colin Trevorrow was going to have, but obviously that was scrapped, and they're confirming now that Plagueis was indeed Palpatine's master. Plagueis had not acted fast enough in his own moment of death. But Sidious, sensing the flickering light in his apprentice, had been ready for years. So the falling, dying Emperor called on all the dark power of the Force to thrust his consciousness far, far away to a secret place he had been preparing. His body was dead, an empty vessel, long before it found the bottom of the shaft. I thought it got disintegrated in blue light. There was a Force lightning explosion, and he gets disintegrated. But apparently his body survived. It fell all the way down. And his mind jolted to a new awareness in a new body, a painful one, a temporary one. So that is the explanation that the novel's giving you. As he's falling down the shaft into what we thought was a blue mist of energy beam burst, he blinks his eyes and boom, he transfers himself. Somehow he learned to transfer himself to a body far, far away. I guess that's the one on Exegol that we see in Rise of Skywalker. That's all decrepit. Now apparently he was not able. These Emperor's acolytes found his body after it had been, survived the blue outburst of energy, and after the Death Star exploded, and after it went flying into one of the moons of Endor that we see, somehow it survived. The Death Star survived, which is also crazy and pretty unbelievable. But somehow his body survived all that as well. So it survives the fall, it survives the explosion of the Death Star, and it survives flying down through space onto the moon of Endor. And the acolytes, these acolytes of the Emperor, find his body after all this and are able to take a little DNA sample, but they didn't get enough, so they couldn't create a good version of him. So we get this decrepit version that we see in the Rise of Skywalker. This is the best example. This is the best background story that we have. This is the best writing that we're given as to how he survived and appears again in The Rise of Skywalker. So, on top of this, ridiculous excuse for a returned character. We have this just in. Star Wars confirms Rey's father is a failed Palpatine clone. Yes. Rey's father is a failed Palpatine clone. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker novelization, again, because of course it's all they have left to explain things, reveals Rey's father was actually a failed Palpatine clone. So, we thought, we were wondering who is the woman? Who is the woman that possibly could have slept with Palpatine? Well, it turns out there wasn't. There wasn't a woman. This father that we see a flashback of, mind you, we see the little flashback of the parents, right, of Rey in Rise of Skywalker. There's that little vision, and you see the two parents. He looked nothing like Ian McDiarmid at all. Okay, because of course none of this was planned. This is all just thrown in later. So he doesn't look anything like Ian McDiarmid. But they explain it was a not so perfect clone. Okay? Here it says here, who is a useless, powerless failure. Who was a not quite identical clone. Not quite identical, not looking anything like Ian McDiarmid clone. That's what it was. It was we got to figure out something. We got to find out some way of explaining Rey, how she's a Palpatine. So here we go. Here's the writers of the novel coming up with this story, because clearly this was not part of the plan. There was no plan. So, I'll link these articles. I'm not going to read them all. The point of this video is basically, out of all this stuff, what it says to me is there was no one in control of Lucasfilm. There was no plan going into this thing. They're scrambling for answers. They're using whatever media they can. Comics, novels. I'm sure there'll be something with video games that tie into this, TV shows. I'm sure The Mandalorian's going to somehow tie into Snoke or something, or Palpatine. It has to. There's no leadership at Lucasfilm. There's no one steering the ship. It's going off on its own in random directions, and we can't figure out what's left from right. For all the flaws of the prequel trilogy and George Lucas, at least, he had one vision. You could say it was unbridled and no one was there to tell him, no, George, it's not a good idea. Sure, that's true on some things. But at least he had a vision. He followed through with it, and it all was at least streamlined. It pretty much made sense. There's things here and there in the prequels, even in the original trilogy, that don't line up 100%. But those are minor things that don't change what Star Wars is, that don't change canon. The canon that Jason Ward could care less about. George had a vision. He was master of his domain. He was the master in chief of the ship. He was steering it in one direction. And that is something we are seriously lacking right now with Star Wars and at Lucasfilm. And I don't think that's going to change until there's a different leader that takes over, who has a streamlined vision, who gets everyone in all departments alongside them to share that one vision and produce works of art, films, novels, comics, video games, TV shows that share and drive this thing in one direction. Until then, we have stories that are changing the past and filling in gaps, and we're not getting the full story, and the stories contradict, and it makes no sense. And it all goes back to the leadership. So, it's just Kathleen Kennedy. I just don't believe she knows what to do with Star Wars, and I think it's more evident now than it ever has been, especially with this novelization coming out, trying to fill in all these gaps and just changing the past, making it more unbelievable. How did Palpatine survive? He fell down a shaft, and we see him explode in blue mist, but apparently he didn't. The Death Star explodes into bursts of, little bits of matter, but apparently it didn't. It flies through the atmosphere somehow and lands on, a moon of Endor, and the Acolytes are able to find Palpatine's body after all that. It's so unbelievable. And then he's able to just blink as he's falling down after he's been betrayed, shooting Force lightning everywhere, distracted with his sudden death, and he's still able to blink his eyes and transfer himself, thrust his whole being into another body that's been set aside for him. It's such a silly story, and it just shows there's no direction, and all this stuff is being filled in at a later date because there was no plan. So that's it. I've ranted enough. Let me know what you guys think of this video. It's longer than I wanted to be, but honestly, I just had to get all this out. So, thanks for watching. Do subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up and share this video. Let it reach the fandom menace, and hopefully, hopefully this call to to change leadership in Lucasfilm, change.org. That's what we need to start, a petition. All right, guys. Thanks. Till next time. Lock the doors and hope they don't have blasters.